Hey everybody, welcome again to another episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator here, Cypher, and today we have a lot of news for you as this week has been actually pretty busy, depending on how you want to climb it, but it's been fairly busy. But before we get into the news roundup for today, let's talk about it a little bit. So if this is your first time joining us, this is the Thursday news roundup coming at you from Crowdsourced Politics. Crowdsourced Politics is a podcast born out of a funky little debate community on Facebook, and we've been podcasting for about 2 years now, and we do the Thursday news roundup as a way to do a kind of a summary of what the news happened with the kind of analysis only the crowd deck can provide. We typically do this every Thursday from 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, give or take about 15 minutes or so. And we just covered the news of the last week. We also do other podcasts with Crowdsourced Politics. One of those other podcasts is called Cipher State. Cipher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast that dives a deep, about an hour to an hour and a half worth of information into a particular topic that is facing the geopolitical stage. We invite people from the Twitch and YouTube political debate communities across the political spectrum to talk about these kind of issues. Our last episode was called Narco State, and you can find that currently on YouTube. We're still editing the audio, but once the audio is edited, we will have that up on wherever you get your podcast. So yeah, we're going to give it another few more seconds, play around with the settings a little bit here. This a little bit higher on the music. Should be good on that. I think that sounds good. So yeah, let's go ahead and start the show. Welcome everybody back to the news roundup. So let's go ahead and get this started. At the top of the news is we're going to talk about Congress. Congress has returned this week to a full plate. Democrats are focused on getting key parts of President Biden's agenda done before the first State of the Union address on March 1st. At stake are passing the House China competition bill, Ukraine, and the fiscal omnibus legislation that must be completed before February 18th. So we'll start with the China competition bill, also known as the Competence Act. So the House is focused on passing their version of the Senate's China competition bill, which passed with 19 Republican votes last June. You might think that the House bill would pass easily, but there are complications that include a Republican campaign to paint the bill as China-friendly and integral struggles on the Democratic side of the aisle. Yes, the Democrats hold the majority in the House, so the bill will pass the chamber, but it is bound to run up against major issues in the Senate where 10 Republican votes will be necessary for its passage. The House bill, dubbed the Competence Act, is full of controversial Democratic-sponsored trade provisions that trouble some Republicans. That means it's destined for a conference committee where Republicans hold the power of the filibuster. And House Democrats said to be peeved that the leadership is circumventing the committee process, so we may see conflict there as well. Debates on our amendments are happening as we speak, and the final vote is expected tomorrow. Now, what is the importance of this bill? So the importance of this bill is, generally speaking, is to acknowledge that China has done anti-competitive trade policies, such as dumping excess. Actually, I'm going to turn the music off. I don't think I like it. So competitive trade practices, such as dumping excess goods onto the market, overly compensating businesses with super low interest loans, the government itself being in the business of running these businesses. And so Congress wants to pass a bill that will work to kind of alleviate some of those things, either through buying directly from American manufacturers, or sanctioning China in certain regards, or going to the World Trade Organization, and all these kind of other things meant to bolster American businesses above Chinese businesses. And so that's what this is going here. There's been a lot of talk that like Trump was the first person to really do this, but we can track this all the way back to actually George W. Bush, and especially Obama. Obama did some of these things as well, taking China to the World Trade Organization and going through the processes to make sure that America would not run afoul of its trade treaty agreements. And so be sure to pay attention to this show, where we'll be covering updates as they happen. So let's go ahead and move on to Ukraine. So what is going on with Ukraine? Well, let's talk about it. As reported last week, on last week's Roundup, Congress is striving to pass bipartisan legislation to deter Russian aggression against Ukraine. Democrats filibustered a bill sponsored by Texas Republican Senator Ted Cruz last month in favor of a bill sponsored by Bob Menendez, Democrat of New Jersey, because Menendez's bill represented the mother of all sanctions, quote unquote. Quote, "We're in conversations with Republicans to see if we can amalgamate some of their ideas and have a bipartisan vote that will unify us," he told reporters before last week's recess. Menendez told CNN on Sunday that he and Foreign Relations ranking member Jim Risk, Republican of Idaho, were at the, quote, 1 yard line on the package. It would impose a suite of sanctions on Russian mining and drilling, as well as the Nord Stream project. Nord Stream project is the natural gas pipeline connecting Russia's pipeline to German's pipeline in order to bring in more natural gas into Europe. So it would now senators on both sides of the aisle are laser focused on crafting legislation that will address Russia's encroachment into Ukraine. We will also talk about updates about Ukraine later on in the program, but this was specifically focused on Congress. So we'll go ahead and continue talking about Congress. So Congress kicked the budget legislation down the road last week and now are running against the clock to avoid a government shutdown. The fiscal 2022 omnibus, literally combined appropriations bills, legislation contained 12 separate bills. It must pass by February 18th. Quote, "We are progressing, I think, very well," Democrat of Vermont Senate Appropriations Chair Patrick Leahy said before lawmakers left town for last week's recess. Senator Richard Shelby, Republican of Alabama, the top GOP senator appropriator, agreed that lawmakers, quote, "are a lot better off than they were a month ago on a package that would fund all federal agencies through the end of September." And why the end of September? Because the fiscal budget for the government is actually November to November or October to October. One of those two, forgot which one. But in the last budget, they agreed to fund the government up until this month on January 18th. There's some wiggle room there, but not a lot. And so then when they pass the next one, they'll cover the rest of the fiscal year. Now, the sticking point is the $1.5 trillion in discretionary spending. Democrats want large increases focused on domestic agencies and to keep defense spending mostly flat. Republicans want, quote unquote, equity between defense and national security accounts. Representative Mike Simpson, Republican from Idaho, the ranking member of the House Energy and Water Development Appropriations Subcommittee, told E&E News he believes the impasse will be resolved. The holdup, then, he said, will be policy riders. Policy riders are often included in the must-pass bills. The thinking is that adding policy riders will force bipartisan support in order to prevent a government shutdown. The whole thing is whether Democrats are willing to get rid of the riders that have historically been in there. That's the only thing stopping us from coming to an agreement, Simpson said. Republicans have largely been focused on maintaining a policy provision that bars federal funding for abortions except in limited circumstances, known as the Hyde Amendment. Those limited circumstances are the threaten of life of the mother or grave bodily harm therein, and typically that means that Medicaid will cover abortions where the mother's life is at stake, or grave bodily harm, which is actually stipulated what those things mean in the law. Where Democrats want to get rid of the Hyde Amendment and just allow Medicaid to cover abortion in general. So Democrats are pushing to strip out the provision that has been in place in some form since the 1970s. Carlos Monje, the Undersecretary for Policy at the Transportation Department, expressed concern during briefings last week about spending impasse slowing down the disbursement of dollars from the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, which Congress actually passed last fall. Make sure I'm not missing any comments. Okay. Oop. We're gonna camera in. Let's fix that. Go. Continuing on. So with agencies currently operating under stopgap funding set at fiscal 2021 levels, Monje explained they are restricted from starting many of the new programs called for by the infrastructure package. Quote, the department has begun to move forward on as many aspects of the bill as we can, he said, but some programs are hampered by legislative challenges resulting from the constraints that are in continuing resolution. Republicans in the Senate are in no hurry to pass the omnibus legislation. If it fails to pass, the Trump-era spending policies will remain in place, and that's fine with Senate Republicans, as that won't lead to possible increases in the federal budget, something the Republicans just can't stand for. There's some indication that the legislation will again be kicked down the road with another stopgap spending bill. The options would take up floor time in both chambers, which would not be good for Democrats. Now, circling back to Ukraine. So let's talk about what is going on in Ukraine proper and get this shared up on the screen here. Oops, that is my Twitter. So get that shared up and maximize it. Zoom in a little bit. All right. So basically what we're seeing here is this is a map of where Russian troops are positioned permanently and newly arrived units. The permanent stationed ones are the larger red bubbles, and the small little square ones where they don't know are where there have been new troop deployments. So let's go ahead and zoom in this on a little bit more so we can see a bit better. So as you can see here, we have a ton, well, we have new troop deployments. We don't know how many that represents, stationed in Belarus at the Ukraine border, which is closer to Kiev than the Russian border is itself. And we see additional troops stationed in Moldova, in Donetsk, in Crimea, Russia, and like I said already, Belarus. So what does this mean? So let's talk about it. So according to Reuters, NATO said Russia had stepped up deployments to Ukraine's northern border of Belarus in recent days and has expected to have as much as 30,000 troops there for joint military exercises this month. The Russia-Belarus exercises, running from until February 20th, have provided Moscow with cover to further increase troop forces near Ukraine at a time when the United States and Britain have warned that Moscow may be gearing up for war. Russia continues to deny planning an invasion of Ukraine and has described the Allied resolved exercises with Belarus as a rehearsal in repelling external aggression. It has not disclosed the size of its forces there, but they say they will withdraw after the drills. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, "Over the last few days, we have seen a significant movement of Russian military forces into Belarus. This is the biggest Russian deployment there since the Cold War, with an expected 30,000 combat troops, as well as Spetsnaz Special Operation Forces, Su-35 jets, S-400 air defense systems, nuclear-capable Iskander missiles, and so on." Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, who has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine in the crisis, was due to visit Kiev today. Ukraine and Turkey will sign a framework agreement on manufacturing Turkish drones in Ukraine, a move that is certain to annoy Moscow. Now, this is also interesting here, right? So we have Erdogan in Turkey having eyes on either starting to or rebuilding the Ottoman Empire, or at least making Turkey more of a force in the region, and Russia doing the same thing, and both have their eyes on Ukraine. I mean, I guess? I don't know. This is one of those situations where I don't know if Erdogan's actually willing to play ball that way, but it does tend to raise the stakes a little bit. Not necessarily saying Russia and Turkey will go to war, but it does throw a little bit of a monkey wrench into what is going on currently. So that's an interesting development. Now, Ukraine and Turkey will sign the framework agreement on manufacturing Turkish drones in Ukraine and move to certain Moscow. Ukraine has already deployed Turkish-made drones in a war with Russia-backed separatists in the east of the country, which is another reason why Turkey might be doing this. Now we also have Biden and the Americans commenting on this situation here. So President Biden announced this week that the United States will send 3,000 troops to Eastern Europe. 2,000 troops will be deployed from North Carolina to Poland and Germany. 1,000 troops already in Germany will be deployed to Romania. Moscow said this deployment was a destructive step which heightened tensions and reduced the scope of a political solution. It's important that we send a strong signal to Mr. Putin and frankly to the world that NATO matters to the United States and it matters to our allies. President spokesman John Kirby told reporters on Wednesday. But on the question of alleged invasion plans by Mr. Putin, he said, we still don't believe he's made a decision to further invade Ukraine. Now, it's important to point out that he said further invade Ukraine here. Now, Reuters, right? Thanks, West dude. Sorry. So one of those issues with this is that Russia is already active in eastern Ukraine, either supplying regular forces under the guise of mercenaries or volunteers, special forces, etc., to help the rebel forces in eastern Ukraine fight against Kiev proper. And that's not good. And that's something that I think a lot of people that are like, no war with Russia, or, just let Russia do what it wants with Ukraine, don't really realize. Like, they've already been really doing this for almost like the last 5 years. Like, it's not something that's new, right? So I'm not sure exactly what they're getting at, but it's a problem. At least in my opinion, it really is. Sorry, everybody. I'm trying to get my chat up so I can put comments on screen. All right. So let's see here. Sorry, I missed your comment, West dude. So let me see what you said. Well, the Trump tax cuts also had caps for this deductions typically taken by the rich. Generally, when you have government pay for something without price controls, the price of said thing skyrockets. I don't know what the second comment I read off is talking about, but as far as the tax cuts are concerned, that is true to a point. And the reason I say to a point is because if you own property in California, the Northeast, even if you're just or hell, like Austin, Austin's getting that expensive now. You aren't necessarily rich just because you own your own home, right? You're middle class. You could have inherited it. You could have bought it like 10, 20 years ago, and the price skyrocketed, and so now you're paying either more on your mortgage, or because you had to refinance for whatever reason, or you just bought in recently, like I did, and the SALT deduction cap that they put into place is actually fairly low, and it negatively impacts people that run their own businesses out of their house as well. So you're right that maybe what Democrats are saying, because a lot of them are in the Northeast and California, are saying maybe raising it to the 75,000 range on that. It might not be too good of a policy. I don't think that the current cap on it is actually good, especially given that the people that would benefit most from having it raise a little bit are just taking the standard deduction right now. So I think there's wiggle room to play with that, but you do make a good point. No, so not really. It depends on the state, whether or not that allows you to take a double dip. Because in the federal tax code, it did already account for you not being able to claim your interest deduction and like your business operating inside that one room in your house. Like you had to section it off, so you couldn't actually double dip. But yeah, I mean, you're making good points. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I think there's wiggle room to play in there, and that's what that should be acknowledged. All right. But let me continue on with what we're talking about here with Ukraine. So back onto Ukraine. So now, but the question of alleged invasion plans by Mr. Putin, he said, we don't believe he's made a decision to further invade Ukraine. As previously stated, they're already in Ukraine. He also said a proposal leaked to a European news outlet was genuine. He appeared to be referring to a story in Spain, El País newspaper about a U.S. offer of talks with Russia in exchange for reducing tensions over Ukraine. The U.S. proposal reportedly included, quote, reciprocal commitments by the U.S. and Russia to refrain from deploying offensive ground-launched missile systems and permanent forces with a combat mission in the territory of Ukraine, talk about reducing nuclear weaponry and missile launchers, a transparency mechanism to show Russia there are no U.S. cruise missiles at 2 NATO bases in Romania and Bulgaria, in exchange for Russia allowing the U.S. to check 2 Russian bases for missiles similarly. The document said the U.S. would discuss all issues that affect European security with its allies, though. Right. Well, I'm saying like depending on your state whether you double dipped or not, because you could claim it on your state and you could claim it on your federal. That would be the double dipping. That's what I was getting at. But this is actually a great segue into this weird thing that's happening with the IRS. And maybe you're going to like agree with me, or maybe I'm going to disagree with you on this, but let's talk about it. So continuing on with the news that's coming at you, the IRS is currently getting flack for its request for facial recognition to utilize its services. The IRS has decreed that taxpayers must provide a video of their face to access the government website. The rule could go into effect this summer. It's a major expansion of the government's use of facial recognition software, and Congress is not happy, and taxpayers are confused. So let's talk about it. So according to the Washington Post, as of the reporting of this, the rule would require any person who wants to access the IRS government website to provide a photo of their face to a private contractor, ID.me. The $86 million ID.me contract with the IRS has alarmed researchers and privacy advocates who say that they worry about Americans' facial images and personal data will be safeguarded in the years to come. There's no federal law regulating how the data can be used or shared, unlike what is going on with Europe with the GDPR. While the IRS couldn't say what percentage of taxpayers use the agency's website, internal data shows that one of the federal government's most viewed websites, with more than 1.9 billion visits last year alone. The partnership with ID.me has drawn anger from some members of Congress, including Senator Ron Wyden, of Democrat from Oregon, who tweeted that he was, quote, very disturbed by the plan and would push the IRS for greater transparency. Representative Ted Lieu, Democrat of California, called it a very, very bad idea by the IRS that would, quote, further weaken Americans' privacy. The Senate Finance Committee is working to schedule briefings with the IRS and ID.me on the issue, a committee aide had said. A Treasury official said Friday that the department was looking into alternatives to ID.me, saying Treasury and the IRS always are interested in improving taxpayers' experiences. The official offered no further detail, however, and referred reporters to ID.me for details of their technology and safety controls. 1 second. While spokesman for ID.me declined to comment. Bloomberg News first reported the possibility that Treasury might consider an alternative to the facial recognition technology. Jeremy D. Scott, senior counsel of the Electronic Privacy Information Center, a research group in Washington, said the IRS's outsourcing of identity checks to a private company could weaken the public's ability to know how information is being used, especially because no federal laws govern how facial recognition should work nationwide. Quote, you go from a government agency that at least has some obligation under the Privacy Act and other laws to a third party where there isn't a lot of transparency and understanding, and that potential risk goes way up. We haven't even gone the step of putting regulations in place and deciding if facial recognition should even be used like this, he added. We're just skipping right to the use of the technology that has clearly shown to be dangerous and has issues of accuracy, disproportionate impact, privacy, and civil liberty implications. The technology isn't perfect, and researchers say identity verification errors can block a person from accessing vital services or allow an imposter to get through. So let's talk about this a little bit. So part of the reason why the IRS is wanting to actually do this is in an attempt, at least from what I can see, an attempt to actually increase security, because too many people have had their identity stolen. And then those once the identity is stolen, then the person can go to the IRS's website and then get additional information. So if you have somebody's social security number, and if they already have a login information, you got that too. Go on the IRS website, download all the rest of their information from the website that is available off the web, and do other things with it, such as applying for loans, etc., and so on and so forth. Now, ID.me has been used by a lot of veteran-linked groups to validate veteran status, and it actually, I think, is already used or verified through the VA as well. So that's an interesting thing that I don't think a lot of people know about. So if you're a veteran and you wanted to get a discount, like say at what is it called? Well, it's Busch Gardens, right? Any of the Busch Gardens theme parks or whatever. You could actually go sign up with ID.me, verify that you're a veteran, and you can get your 10, 20% discount, whatever it may be, or free admission to things like that. And that's what this is used for as well. Well, I see we got some comments here, so let's let us find out. Let's see. All right, so West Dude says, yes, the only financial and like SSN is protected by the Privacy Acts of 1974 or 1978. As far as he knows, there are no federal protections for biometrics outside healthcare and HIPAA for biometrics. True. And also agreed, looks like you agreed with me about the need for protect against identity theft. Currently, the only additional security is a PIN number that they send you for the IRS. Yeah, that's also true. So good thing to point out there. All right. So everybody, hey, thank you for joining the News Roundup. If this is your first time joining the round, hi everybody, I'm Cypher. And we do this at Crowdsourced Politics every Thursday from roughly 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to roughly about 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also, so that's the News Roundup. We're also do another podcast called Cypher State, and Cypher State is a foreign affairs and foreign policy focused podcast where we invite guests from the Twitch and YouTube political debate community across the entire political spectrum to discuss a particular topic impacting the geopolitical stage. Do that for about an hour or so and try to go dive deep and give you the kind of give you analysis, give you history, the who's, the what's, the whys, the whens, and maybe the hows of an issue, and talk about what is to come from it, or what we think is to come from it. In addition to that, we are going to be setting up another podcast, and this podcast is called Praxis Run. Praxis Run is a podcast dedicated to interviewing people that have put their moral theory into practice, hence Praxis Run. We are going to interview people from across the political spectrum, because the goal of this particular podcast is not to have a political lens, but to understand other people's political lenses and help people understand how best to put those into practice. So one of the things you could expect on this kind of program is that 1 month we might interview a pro-life activist, and the next month we might interview a pro-choice activist. We might interview a school choice person and a person that's on the union of a school board that's against school choice for various reasons, and so on. Anti-war activists, people that believe in like democratic peace theory, like a bunch of different kinds of people, all to expose people to new ideas, new ways of looking at things, new ways of putting those ideas into practice, and to hopefully tamp down on the political divide by helping people understand where other people are coming from. So if that's something that you're interested in, either watching or participating in, or you have somebody that you think this person's got to be interviewed, send them our way. And you can do that by joining the Discord, or once that plays out, hitting me up on Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter. So let's go ahead and continue on with the news. So this is okay. So let's start our second segment on elections with an update on what the national picture looks like for Democrats going into the midterm as the underdogs. So what is happening? So according to Politico, the fight isn't over, but House Democrat campaign chief believes his party has at least avoided a redistricting doomsday that would have automatically handed the GOP the keys next January. Republicans still hold an indisputable advantage going into the midterms. This is for multiple reasons. It's for the way the districts are being drawn. It's because the party that's in power, quote unquote, that has the presidency typically does worse going into the first congressional election, and among other things. Now, but Democrats have seized this year's redistricting battle with an unprecedented ruthlessness, carving out many blue territory that most had expected even just a few months ago, and netting key wins in the courts. That includes New York's new map this week, which Democrats could pick up as many as 3 seats, even as the state loses 1 overall. Then there's the party's legal approach, including a successful lawsuit so far in Ohio and Alabama, with several more critical court updates to come in the next week. We're doing a hell of a lot better than pundits thought we would. The CCC chair, New York Democrat Representative Sean Patrick Maloney, said in an interview Tuesday, adding that his team's own internal projections for Democrats up 5 to 8 seats, better than they expected. Still, the party's strong success in a handful of states, like Illinois, Oregon, and now New York, on top of a surprise Supreme Court vacancy and a steady decline in nationwide coronavirus cases, has injected much needed energy into the Democrats' push to keep the House come November. The strong maps for House Democrats in a handful of critical states come after a brutal winter for the party, which has now racked up 29 retirements, the most since the 1996 cycle. Now, one of the things that's also noted is that we should probably talk about here a little bit of it, is to mention that Republicans haven't been sleeping on this one. Okay, Republicans in a slew of states, including Florida and Texas, are starting to demand that Republican legislatures that have the ability to just go all out and just make the whole maps red for the states as much as they can, that will survive court challenges. And what we've seen from Republican map drawing from legislatures, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago, just briefly touch about it, is that they've, instead of trying to pick up more seats, they instead try to cement their advantages that already exist and maybe pick up 1 or 2 seats. And the reason that they went about this is because they were afraid of court challenges that could delay the implementation of the congressional seats being drawn, and courts doing and having their own way with it, or mandating how maps would be drawn. And so that's why you saw, like in Texas, there was only like a 2-seat pickup when it was like 1 seat pickup, and then the rest of them were just like, hey, if these were light pink at some point, they're now dark red, right? Sorry, my nose itches. So that's what we're seeing. And Democrats are like, hey, we learned from the best, right? We saw what you did in 2010. We saw what you did in redistricting that happened after 2010 due to courts. So we're just going to go ham and listen to Eric Holder and actually draw our states even bluer than they are now. And so you have that push and pull that's coming here. Ideally, at least to me, none of this would happen. There would be, either there would be less districts, but with more congressional members that belong in each district, and each person would like basically proportionally represent so many people in that district, or the maps would be drawn based on population densities and things like be like neat little things. But that's not how people live, and so you're stuck with this for now. But hold on a second, I need to itch my nose and drink some water. All right, I'm back. Okay, so let's talk about Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania Supreme Court on Wednesday took control of a high-stakes redistricting lawsuit and will now decide how the state's congressional districts will be drawn for the next decade. A lower court has poised to select a new map from among 13 proposals this week after the normal redistricting process between the governor and state legislature broke down. Now the high court will instead make the decision, exercising its extraordinary jurisdiction power to take over any case. That will likely speed up the selection of a final map, which was the stated goal of the plaintiffs who asked the Supreme Court to step in. The clock is ticking, though. There are less than 4 months until May 17th primary, and uncertainty about district boundaries has kept candidates, voters, and the election administration in limbo. Now, also from Pennsylvania, hold on a second, let me make sure I'm not missing any comments. Oh, thanks, Osiris. Appreciate you joining. So also from Pennsylvania, and this is a state election law update. The court in Pennsylvania has struck down the state's landmark election law as unconstitutional, dealing a temporary blow to voting access in one of the nation's most critical battleground states. In a 3-2 decision, the state court sided with the 14 Republican lawmakers who sued last year, arguing that the law was unconstitutional. Pennsylvania filed an appeal to its Supreme Court on Friday afternoon, triggering automatic stay that keeps the law in place during the appeals process. The law, known as Act 77, was passed by the Republican-controlled legislature and signed by Governor Tom Wolf, a Democrat, in 2019. It permitted no-excuse absentee voting, created a permanent mail-in voter list, reduced the voter registration deadline from 30 days to 15 days, and provided $90 million in election infrastructure upgrades. Now, the deadline, reducing it from 30 to 15 days, is actually a win for voters. This means that you could register to vote later in the cycle, and so that means more opportunity to decide to vote, or if you missed it or whatever, it gives you more time. Now, it also eliminated straight ticket voting. Now, Democrats in Pennsylvania said that they were not surprised that the Commonwealth Court, which they said leans conservative, ruled against the law. They expressed confidence that the appeal to the Supreme Court, which has sided with the state on voting issues both during and following the 2020 election, would be successful. We'll take a deeper dive into this in our next election segment in 2 weeks. Now, one of the interesting things here that I think that should be talked about a little bit here is the fact that it eliminated straight ticket voting. And this is a thing that people on both the right and the left, there's mixed bag of whether people support it or not. Republicans, at least in my experience in the states that I've lived in, have typically not favored this because it made it easier for a person to just be like, Republicans suck, let me fill out a bubble in. At the same time, it makes it possible for people to do the same thing with the with the other side, against Democrats just filling in the Republican bubble, right? And what we saw there, what we tend to see here is that the concern is that people aren't putting much weight into who they're voting for, and it would tilt the election to low information voters. And I don't personally have a problem with that, but I at least understand where people are coming from when they talk about that. But with that said, is that really that low of information, though? Is it any different than a person, listening to a group of people say, hey, vote for these candidates? When I say a group of people, I mean sometimes churches or religious organizations, hell, Democrat or Republican groups themselves, progressive groups putting out a voter guide. I don't really see much of a difference there, other than maybe a person that doesn't know every single judge that's up for election, or every single alderman in a state or county or whatever is up for election, and not knowing those people individually. School boards might be another issue with that. So, but just knowing a party, because of how much division exists, is actually telling you a lot of information these days. So I think that's just something to think about. Let's see. Oh, yeah, this is a good comment. So the West dude, it eliminated the option for choice to automatically vote party, but you can still do it. You just have to do it manually, voting for all one party instead of one party won't invalidate the ballot. True. I don't think I was getting at that. Instead of having to check one box, you have to mark them all on the ballot. Yes, that's true. So yeah, I don't know. I personally, I used to be of the mind that it's a thing that shouldn't exist, but as I've gotten older and seen how elections play out and everything like that, I don't think it's really a thing that anybody should be concerned themselves with. But that's just my opinion. All right. 1 second. All right. So for the next segment, we got some news about a US-led attack that has killed the ISIS leader. And we're going to hear that from the horse's mouth directly and listen to what Biden has to say about that. So let's go ahead and move over. Oh, ad. Hold on a second. I had the ad already cleared, but it reset the wait time. There we go. All right, let's listen to Biden's remarks about the successful attack against ISIS today.
Tonight, operating on my orders, the United States military forces successfully removed a major terrorist threat to the world, the global leader of ISIS, known as Haji Abdullah. He took over as leader of ISIS in 2019 after the United States counterterrorism operation killed al-Baghdadi. Since then, ISIS has directed terrorist operations targeting Americans, our allies, and our partners, and countless civilians in the Middle East, Africa, and in South Asia. Haji Abdullah oversaw the spread of ISIS-affiliated terrorist groups around the world after savaging communities and murdering innocents. He was responsible for the recent brutal attack on a prison in northeast Syria holding ISIS fighters, which was swiftly addressed by our brave partners in the Syrian Democratic Forces. He was the driving force behind the genocide of the Yazidi people in northwestern Iraq in 2014. We all remember the gut-wrenching stories, mass slaughters that wiped out entire villages, thousands of women and young girls sold into slavery, rape used as a weapon of war. And thanks to the bravery of our troops, this horrible terrorist leader is no more.
Now, it's important to mention that while killing leaders of groups does tend to put in some disarray into organizations, especially ones like ISIS, where there's a lot of command and control over the particular forces. When any time these operations take place, and when anytime this has happened, at least for the last, 20, 30 years or so, it hasn't been like a death blow. There's been a delayed in action for like either retaliation or getting it might cause some infighting in the group to wrestle its control. But because of the Al-Qaeda model, we see that it's kind of like a hydra. Once you cut one head off, multiple grow back, and the organization is still able to carry out operations despite the fact that its leader had just been killed because of its decentralized nature. Now, again, ISIS tends to be a little more centralized than Al-Qaeda was, but it has started to follow the Al-Qaeda model since their loss of their caliphate in Syria due to a combination of Russian, U.S., Kurdish, and American forces and Iraqi forces. So that's something that should be actually pointed out here.
Our forces carried out the operation with their signature preparation and precision, and I directed the Department of Defense to take every precaution possible to minimize civilian casualties. Knowing that this terrorist...
Now, while the precaution was done, and one of the biggest precautions about this was actually sending in forces directly into the building instead of just bombing it. It's an urban area. It's a city. It's a town with a lot of people. So anytime that you have military operations that happen in urban environments, you're going to end up killing innocent people. It is the nature of war, in urban areas. Again, another thing that needs to be mentioned.
Had chosen to surround himself with families, including children, we made a choice to pursue a special forces raid at a much greater risk than to our own people, rather than targeting him with an airstrike.
True.
We made this choice to minimize civilian casualties. Our team is still compiling the report, but we do know that as our troops approach to capture the terrorist, in a final act of desperate cowardness, he, with no regard to the lives of his own family or others in the building, he chose to blow himself up, not just to the vest, but to blow
I'm taking
up
you
that
motherfuckers
third
with
floor,
me.
rather than face justice for the crimes he has committed, taking several members of his family with him, just as his predecessor did.
I'm actually going to comment on this one. So maybe it isn't me, just said in... Oh, that's not what I wanted. There it goes. Good job, Joe. Just funny how different parties reacted to this one and the other Trump's admins carried out. True. There are Republicans that are saying this was bad. There are Democrats that said it was bad under Trump. At least with me personally, when it comes to killing of terrorists, I don't care. That's what it boils down to. Fuck them. So I am not anti-drone war. Like, I'm not pro-drone war. I'm not saying we should just drone everything. I'm not Tulsi Gabbard when it comes to this, but I'm also not anti their use, and they can be used well. But yeah, good point.
I'm grateful for the immense courage and skill and determination of our U.S. forces, who skillfully executed this incredibly challenging mission. The members of our military are the solid steel backbone of this nation, ready to fly into danger at a moment's notice to keep our country and the American people safe, as well as our allies. And I'm also grateful to the families of our service members. You served right alongside these soldiers and sailors, Marines, Special Forces, the loved ones, giving them the strength and support they need to do what they do. To our service members and their families.
So we're going to head and call it there, and we're going to give some additional context and information to what this raid accomplished, in addition to what you just heard from Biden. So the raid was conducted by the counterterrorism unit in the United States military known as JSOC, or Joint Special Operations Command. Mindful of the high risk of harm to civilians and to commandos, military engineers told President Biden that they did not believe the entire building would collapse if Mr. Al-Awrasi detonated a suicide vest or other explosives on the third floor. Shortly after the commandos arrived, warning broadcasted in Arabic over loudspeakers to occupants on the first floor, as well as anyone else, to evacuate the building. One man, one woman, and an unspecified number of children fled the building. The American officials said all the casualties resulted from the explosion on the third floor. Soon after, the ISIS leader detonated his explosives in a blast so large that bodies were blown out the windows, the officials said. Commandos stormed the building and engaged in a firefight with Mr. Al-Awrasi, top lieutenant, and his wife on the second floor. Both were killed, but 4 children were safely evacuated. Preliminary reports that 13 civilians also died, including 6 children. At one particular tense moment in the operation, a U.S. helicopter ferrying commandos to the building experienced a mechanical problem. It limped to the location well away from the target site, where commanders determined it could not be readily repaired and was destroyed by a U.S. air attack. At another moment, 2 fighters on the ground fired at the American helicopter, which fired back, killing the militants, officials said. So that is what happened here. Now, I understand the people that are upset anytime civilians die in war. So I'm not going to say people shouldn't be upset. I'm not going to say, like, just deal with it. I'm not going to say that. What I am going to say is that if these are, or if you at all agree with these kind of operations being carried out to take out really bad people, objectively bad people, to kill them, to take them off the face of the planet so they cannot do more harm to other people, then you have to realize that sometimes that's going to mean that civilians die. It is the nature of the game. The fact that Biden authorized an in-person attack on this rather than decimating a building is actually improvement, and that needs to be recognized. And that's all I got to say about this. So now What's going on? What's going on? What's a little bit fun news that has some Schadenfreude or some interesting information about, censorship or something? What is it? Oh yeah, Spotify. And Spotify is experiencing a very weird kind of weird, what you call it, decrease in stock prices, and people are leaving. What's going on? What is going on with this stuff, right? Well, as the West dude said, yeah, it's all about the Rogue Man. It's all about Joe Rogan, the man's man, the podcaster. So yeah, but let's talk about it, because I think there's actually kind of interesting, and it says more about sociology than I think a lot of people realize what it's saying. But let's give you some of the facts here. So prior to this recent kerfuffle, Spotify paid $100 million for the privilege of exclusively hosting the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. So on this podcast, Joe Rogan has interviewed a ton of different guests, different opinions, political stripes, sports stars, psychiatrists, evolutionary biologists. A whole host of people have been on this program. But in recent months, due to COVID, due to some of the things, due to some of his own proclivities, his own biases on this thing, he has interviewed people that are not exactly in the mainstream on what COVID is. Some people have been anti-vax mandate. Some people have actually said that the vaccine is dangerous, or at least according to them, it is dangerous. It's not dangerous. Let me be clear. The vaccine is fine, right? In fact, Joe Rogan has been corrected live on air, because a lot of these are live, that he was spreading misinformation about COVID, at least about the vaccine with myocarditis in young men, as what has been studied over the last 4 or 5 months or so and replicated is that myocarditis is actually a symptom of COVID. It's caused by the spike protein that is in COVID in young men. And when you get it from COVID versus when you get it from the shot, because you can get it from the shot, it is much worse with the COVID without the vaccine. And when you get it from the vaccine or from COVID after receiving the vaccine, so you got the vaccine, you're protected against COVID, but you still got COVID, the vaccine still offers a ton of protection, and it is entirely manageable on that. And Rogan was floored. Joe Rogan was floored about this. So that brings us up to date about where this controversy started. In response to that, last month, Neil Young requested that Spotify remove his music from the platform due to this misinformation. And since then, and this is where the interesting thing comes from, at least in my opinion, since then, a slew of artists have been coming out and also removing their music. Now, the West dude is correct here that it was some older artist, but there's been some iconic artists, some R&B artists, some Grammy winners, and other people that have since chosen to remove their music from Spotify as well. And due to the correction that is happening in the market in general, which we will talk about later in our economic segment, it is making Spotify look really bad. So I want to talk about that a little bit, right? Not that it's making Spotify look bad, but that it's all these factors are coming together to put pressure on Spotify and make people question whether or not they should still do business with Spotify. And the reason I want to say that is because when Neil Young removed his music, it gave other people permission to remove theirs. And it's causing this somewhat cascade effect of where once the dam has been broken, once the seal has been breached, whatever analogy you want to use on this, more people are saying, maybe I should do the same thing. So I want to know your guys' thoughts about that, right? What is this? What is this? Like, I don't know. I don't know. Oh, I got a lot of comments from this one. Okay, hold on. So, oh yeah, so Osiris has got a good point here, so let's get that one up here. So despite the fact that Joe Rogan has been exclusively signed to Spotify, they're not putting up all of his episodes on the platform. Osiris, ironically, there's a bunch of episodes that the podcast Spotify wouldn't allow him to air when they signed this deal, but those are still available on YouTube. Curious. Let's see. Leaving. Yep. I found it. So maybe it isn't me. I find it funny. No one is leaving YouTube, Twitter, or any other platform Rogan is on. True. That's true, because those aren't paying Joe Rogan $100 million to host his service, to host his podcast. So that's the thing here, right? What we're seeing is that once you vertically integrate your company, once you become more than just a platform, when you start being the creator of content, which is when you pay a content creator rights to, or pay money to exclusively host that content creator above all other platforms, well, you become the content creator's daddy. And that means we can go after you and go after your bottom line. And that's going to ruffle people's feathers a different way than, as maybe it isn't me stated here, than just being on the same platform that everybody else is on. So I think that's interesting. Let's see. Got some other comments here. Minor correction. Let's see. Minor correction from correction to vaccines have been, I don't know why that disappeared. There we go. Have been approved. The CDC, FDA requirements of greater than 75% effectiveness against the virus, but the Omicron, the current vaccines appear to be capping under that. Yes, that is true. The Omicron is wiggling underneath the 75 effectiveness, but it's still quite effective. Let's see. Slew, John. Yep. More people. Let's see. So, like I said, a slew because I'm not a music person like you are. Maybe it isn't me. But so I put this up there. So people are leaving, such as Joni Mitchell, Nia Lofgren, Young, Nash, Stills, and a few more. Current artists are still staying put. I see what you're saying. You're saying that current artists, people that are currently touring and making music and doing that sort of stuff, are staying on the platform while older artists are seeming to leave. Yeah, that's fair. But it's still interesting. I think it's more interesting. I don't really care that people are leaving it so much, that I think it's interesting that once one person decided to, it gave people permission to leave as well. Right? But I want to know what your thoughts are. Go ahead again. Hit me up on Twitter and let me know what your thoughts are at Crowdsourced Poll on Twitter. All right, let's continue on with the news. Now, there's some weird stuff going on in Florida. It seems like there's always weird stuff going on in Florida. Florida's like, what is it, the redheaded stepchild of the United States or something. No shade on Florida. Just there's always some weird shit going on in Florida, right? And it's always on the news. Google Florida man. Google man, and you're gonna get Florida man did X, right? So that's what we're gonna be talking about here. So, according to Politico and USA Today, the Orange County Sheriff's Office confirmed that a protest took place on Saturday and that a fight broke out between demonstrators and a passerby. Quote, the group assembled on public property was reported by witnesses to be wearing clothing with Nazi insignia and yelling profanities and anti-Semitic slurs at vehicles passing by, read a statement from Orange County Sheriff's Office. Governor Ron DeSantis' press secretary faced massive backlash after she sent tweets Sunday night questioning whether pro-Nazi demonstrations in Orlando over weekend were organized by Democratic staffers. Because, of course, anything bad that happens to one party was nefarious, the nefarious things of the other party, and we're just trying to make everybody look bad, right? Because you can't own up to your shit. Now, this applies to Democrats too. Like, this is a thing that everybody needs to just own up to their stupid shit. If communists are like protesting and breaking shit and they're supporting you, then you need to tell them to fuck off. Not do this waffle like it was actually the Democrats, it was actually the Republicans. Can't do that shit. Come on. Now her comment in the now deleted tweet, Usha suggested that a group of about 20 protesters who were seen wearing Nazi symbols and shouting anti-Semitic slurs Saturday afternoon could be potential opponents of Ron DeSantis, trying to frame the governor in a bad light. Right, because he has control over Nazis? I mean, are you just telling on yourself here? Like, I don't get what you're saying. Now, her tweet was a reference to several people organized by the anti-Donald Trump Republican group, the Lincoln Project, who posed with tiki torches during last year's Virginia governor's race in an attempt to smear Glenn Youngkin, who at the time was running for governor. Quote, do we even know if they're Nazis? Bouchard tweeted. Or is this a student-like white nationalist who crashed the Youngkin rally in Charlottesville pretending to be a Dem staffer? DeSantis did not weigh in on the rally until he was asked about it on Monday, when he focused on Democrats. He said that they were trying to use the rally to smear him and distract from the President Joe Biden's record. Because, of course, anything that bad happens when your party's in power is the other party's fault. And that's just the way it is. Always and forever. Let's see. Spotify lost $10 billion in share prices in the past 48 hours. Yes. But okay, so just to talk about this one a little bit, it's a comment that I missed about the Spotify thing. So this is very much true. If you look at Spotify has actually been decreasing in value since November pretty consistently. Also, if you look at the entire market was down about 25%. Netflix lost about 30% of its value in one day in a crash. But the difference is that Spotify hasn't recovered much in the way of its share price, whereas Netflix and some of the other streaming services have. So it's just an important thing to point out. While that is true, there's additional context. Yeah, it's not just Spotify. We're right, the West, dude. Like it's a lot of streaming services. Buy the dip. This is not a financial advice, but buy the dip. All right, continuing on. So we have news of 2 days of bomb threats aimed at historical Black colleges and universities. So the following information has been compiled from reporting from Inside Higher Ed, CNN News, and BuzzFeed News. Historical Black colleges and universities across the country continue to receive bomb threats as part of what federal law enforcement agencies categorize as a connected series of hate crimes. The threats, the latest of which occurred Tuesday, have been made on 3 separate occasions, on January 4th, January 31st, and February 1st, and have prompted affected colleges to either lock down or evacuate their campuses, direct students to shelter in their dorms or elsewhere, and move classes online. Though no explosives were found on the campuses this week and all clear notices were issued, the threats rattled students, parents, faculty, and staff members and prompted a groundswell of support from local, state, and federal policymakers. Members of the House of Representatives Education and Labor Committee and the Senate's Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions issued a statement Wednesday condemning the threats and calling for a briefing on the investigation of the recurring bomb threats by Department of Justice representatives. Quote, such acts of intimidation, which threaten both the safety and education of students enrolled at historical Black colleges and universities, are of grave concern, and we must protect these remarkable institutions and their students, the statements read. The bomb threats come as new data from the Center for Study of Hate and Extremism showed a massive spike last year in suspected hate crimes in over a dozen of the U.S. largest cities. One of the bomb threats against more than a dozen historical Black colleges and universities this week was made by a person who claimed to be part of the neo-Nazi group Atmenwaffen Division, police chief said on Wednesday. For those that might not know, Atmenwaffen Division was the neo-Nazi group that was actually planning a slew of attacks last year and were actually interdicted by FBI. And there was a huge report by ProPublica that I suggest everybody that's interested in learning how these groups operate and navigate the world that we live in and either evade capture or disseminate propaganda and stuff like that, actually go read that. Just Google ProPublica Atmenwaffen Division and you'll find out a very good reporting about this group. Now, the news comes as the FBI announced it had opened a hate crime and violent extremism investigation into the threats, some of which coincided with the first day of Black History Month. No explosives were found on any of the campuses that were threatened, but canceled classes and lockdowns have left some students on edge. And that is sometimes the point. There is nothing... there is no risk to this really except getting caught. And if you have like a burner phone or something like that, the risk of that even is low. And there's not a lot of commitment, right? So it's low risk, low effort, high reward on the act of terrorism thing, right? Because what you're trying to terrorize a group of people, you're trying to disrupt their lives, and this is an easy way to do it. So the fact that there wasn't bombs on there doesn't mean that it still wasn't a terroristic act. You have to understand that. Now, according to NBC News and the Associated Press, authorities have identified at least 6 people of interest. An official describes them to NBC News as, quote, tech-savvy juveniles, and the threats appeared to be racially motivated. The Associated Press reported that investigators believe the callers used spoofed phone numbers to make the threats. There you have it. So, yeah. That's I don't know, like, are we ever going to get beyond this? Like, seriously. When I say we, I mean the country, right? I'm not talking about like any particular person. It's just, like, I don't know. Like, it seems to be that anytime a Democrat, at least for the last, it's 40 years now? Yeah, 40 years has become president, these right-wing groups have gotten more agitated and more involved in terrorizing people and trying to recruit. And that is a problem. It is a metastasized problem. It is a systemic problem. It is a problem that hasn't gone away, and there hasn't been, honestly, enough effort to combat it as a problem. And I'm hoping, and we've seen some evidence of this, but not like a ton, but some evidence that the current Biden administration, the current Justice Department, is actually taking these things on fairly seriously and going after civil rights violations and also groups like this. And I'm hoping that by actually dedicating resources to this actual problem, even if it might be politically risky because of I'm not just talking, okay, so we'll be clear, I'm not just talking about like KKK style groups, Nazi groups, racist groups here. I'm talking about like militia groups and other things. Like, this is a problem. That's how they train. That's how they recruit. This is where they make networks. They do networking. They get other people, right? And going after militia groups themselves might be politically disadvantageous. It might be a disadvantage because a lot of people, especially activists on the right side of the political spectrum, might feel that they are being targeted simply because they are Republican, because they're conservative, because of how interconnected these kind of groups are with one another. But it is something that has to happen. And I'm hoping that it does. I'm hoping there's more investigations. There's more, honestly, there's infiltration and the like done in these groups. And I'm sure that we will find out more information about this particular topic, but also the investigations that DOJ is doing in general in the near future. And be sure to come tune into this program to hear updates about that as well. Now, if there is anything that you would like to see us cover on the News Roundup, there's numerous ways to let us know that you want to hear our opinions and get informed about a particular subject here. And this is how you do it, right? So going to keep plugging that Twitter at Crowdsourced Poll. One of the easiest ways to get a hold of us. You can see us share memes and whatever the hell else is being talked about in the quote unquote discourse there. You can join the Discord community, links above or below, depending on where you're watching this. And actually, I'll put that in chat as well. Let me do that really quick. So Discord. All right. So you can get us on the Discord. We'd like to have contests and stuff. You can't see it, but I have we gave out some miniature piñatas to people that won a meme contest. We gave out a frosted beer mug to a person that won the contest that was able to predict the 2020 election results the closest without going over. They even got Georgia. They got Georgia right. That's how good they were. So we gave that out as a prize. And there's other things that you can do there as well. And if you do, and I know that a lot of people watching this program don't, but if you do Facebook, we do run a Facebook group. Again, Facebook group is the Tribune Commons. So you can find that at Facebook/group/Tribune Commons. And that's again the group that gave birth to the show. And it's a way to talk to people in the wider community with maybe some older folks, maybe some people that you might not interact with on a day-to-day basis. And there's about 400, 500 people there or so. And we all talk about politics and try to do it in a way that isn't as vitriolic as you might get on Reddit or Twitter. So yeah. So moving on, as soon as I get some more water. All right, moving on. So let's talk about the economy. So we'll start our reporting on the economy with a topic suggested by one of our members from our Facebook community. This is based on reporting from CNBC News and the BBC News. A report of global inequality titled Inequality Kills was released last month by Oxfam International. The report showed that the pandemic has made the rich richer while the income of the rest of the world, about 99% of humanity, dropped. The world's 10 richest men have more than doubled their collective fortunes since March of 2020, and a new billionaire was minted every 26 hours since the pandemic began, according to Oxfam. Meanwhile, 160 million more people have been pushed into poverty. This year, what's happening is off the scale, Oxfam's chief executive said. One way to quote unquote claw back the huge gains made by billionaires during the crisis is tax the money that billionaires have made since the start of the pandemic, the report had stated. Quote, a 99% one-off withdrawal tax of the COVID-19 wealth gains of the 10 richest men alone would generate $812 billion, the report stated. These resources could be used to make enough vaccines for the entire world and fill financing gaps in climate measures, universal health care, and social protection, and efforts to address gender-based violence in over 80 countries, it also said. Even after the tax, the world's 10 richest men would still be billionaires, and as a group would have increased their wealth by $8 billion from the start of the pandemic, the report stated. Quote, if these 10 men were to lose 99.99% of their wealth tomorrow, they would still be richer than 99% of all the people on this planet, said Butcher. Beyond a one-off withdrawal tax, governments must also implement or increase permanent wealth and capital gains taxes to, quote, fundamentally and radically reduce wealth inequality, the report had stated. Now, me personally, I'm like soak the rich, but not this much. Because one of the reasons why there was this much gain in the top bracket, actually, soak them a little bit. Soak them a little bit more than maybe I was alluding to, is because of because a lot of people started streaming more. A lot of people started using online services more. People were getting more of their food delivered. And so the tech giants and the super industrialists and the new gilded age was able to reap the benefits of a slowed down economy because they were in the best position to not exploit, but just reap the windfall of that. That combined with the ease of money in order to keep businesses afloat, making loans cheaper than they otherwise would be, allowed people to gin up the stock market a bit and also put more into investments in these firms to generate more money in the long term. Now, we saw a little bit of correction that happened over the last week in the stock market, with the market itself being down roughly 20% or so. And that is good correction territory. And people basically said, oh, I'm out. They're going to raise capital gains. They're going to raise the gains. They're going to raise the interest rate. Let me grab that money and hold it tightly to my chest so it's permanent and I realize those gains. And that makes a fire sale for the rest of us. So yeah, I think that having some sort of windfall tax, because the government did do things to protect people, but those things also made some people make out like bandits. It might be fair to tax them a bit more than we normally would. I wouldn't say tax them at 99% of all the wealth that they gained, but a significant chunk of that could be taxed and it would be morally justifiable. This is true. Let me get your comment up on the screen there. Maybe it isn't me. This is a great comment, honestly. Agreeing with what I said, it was circumstances for many businesses. What I do is what people with a lot of time on their hands buy. A lot of people at home, a lot of music sold, etc. The economy is, I actually grabbed the wrong comment, but that's great. This fine, works anyways. The economy is awesome for some. COVID has been very, very good for my business. It sucks though, the balance is so off. Not right at all. Some of us get all, most get nothing, and it's a headache. So very true, and I'm glad that you're able to recognize you personally have been lucky. I've been lucky too. Not probably as lucky as you have, but I've been very blessed, very lucky in this situation. And I think that, again, like if they raised my taxes a little bit more on this, I don't think I'd complain. I really don't. But continuing on, let's talk about the Fed. So as we've talked about on the news roundup before, the Fed is expected to raise interest rates next month. Some economists are projecting as many as 7 interest rate hikes in 2022. Now, the Times have reported that Fed officials are signaling clearly that the last business cycle is a poor template for what to come next. During the economic expansion that stretched from the global financial crisis to the start of the pandemic, the Fed acted very gradually. It slowly dialed back bond buying meant to help the economy, and it only ploddingly shrank its balance sheets of assets holdings. Central bankers increased borrowing costs sporadically between 2015 and 2018, raising them at every other meeting at their very fastest pace. But inflation was muted. The labor market was slowly crawling out of an abyss, and businesses' conditions needed the Fed's support. This time is very different. A series of Fed presidents emphasized on Monday, suggesting that the pullback in policy support is likely to be quicker and more decisive. 4 of the central bankers' 12 regional presidents spoke on Monday, and all suggested that the Fed could soon begin to cool off the economy. Central bankers are widely expected to make a series of interest rate increases starting in March, and could soon thereafter begin to fairly rapidly shrink their balance sheet holdings. The pace of the policy retreat is still up for debate, and officials reiterated that it is still hinged on incoming data. But several also noted that economic conditions are unusually strong. Quote, "The economy is far stronger than it has been during any of our time in this role, and certainly during any of the recoveries that we've been trying to navigate our policy through in recent memory." Raphael Bostek, president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, said in an interview with Yahoo Finance. Any risk, quote, that our policies are going to lead to contraction in the economy, I think they're relatively far off. Wall Street economists increasingly expect a rapid pace for rate increases this year. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan both expect 5 move rates in 2022, and some Fed watchers have suggested as many as 7. Markets are pricing in small but meaningful chance that the Fed is going to raise rates by a half point in March instead of a more typical quarter percentage point increase. Officials have been careful to emphasize that they do not know what is going to happen next with policy because the economy is so uncertain, especially with Omicron and potentially other variants. Rents are rising and supply chains remain messy, which could keep inflation elevated, but government support programs are waning, which could weigh down on demand. One of the things that I think is that I think the Fed might be doing wrong here is it's planning on to, at least according to all the reporting and indications, it plans to raise interest rates first and then pare down its balance sheet. I personally think that if what they should do is slowly raise, so do like 1 or 2 raises of the interest rate, and then start paring down their balance sheet. I think the balance sheet is going to actually be more effective at soaking up excess capital, or excess liquidity, I should say, in the market, and actually lead to some lower or less inflation in things that people need on a day-to-day basis, which is housing. I think that if the Federal Reserve soaked up a lot of that by selling bonds at a loss, the bonds that it bought at a loss, that we could actually see the people that would normally go into buying in speculative real estate or buying homes that are currently being produced or about to be finished, and buying up property to use as an investment mechanism would go to bonds. And then with the continued increase in rates therein, you would see less investors being in the real estate market and renting and things that actually impact people's day to day, and more people into bonds and perhaps some blue chip stocks. And I think that might be actually a better thing. But I'm not on the Fed. I'm just a dude. So we'll see what happens. Oh, these are good comments from Nova Rain. So interest rates could greatly impact tech stocks, Nasdaq, as speculators are expecting now, hence the minor corrections. Very true. That's a very important point. And then speculative, unprofitable companies do terribly with high rates, but increasingly interest rates actually counterintuitively correlate with strong market performance. True, because actually, can you explain that a little bit more? Unprofitable companies do terribly with high rates. True. Okay, so unprofitable companies with higher rates means they have to offer more with borrowing, and so they have to offer more equity or whatever. So I got that. But increasing interest rates actually counterintuitively correlates with strong market performance, right? Because there's less risky investments being done, and so you have a more stable economy or a more stable stock market or market. I think I agree with you. But if I misinterpreted, let me know. All right. Now, going on to the national debt, which I personally 100% don't give a shit about, but it's on the minds of people and it's being talked about, so let's talk about it. For the first time in history, the U.S. national debt has topped $30 trillion. According to the New York Times, it's an ominous fiscal milestone that underscores the fragile nature of the country's long-term economic health as it grapples with soaring prices and the prospect for higher interest rates. The breach of that threshold, which was revealed in a new Treasury Department figure, arrived years earlier than previously projected as a result of trillions in federal spending that the United States has deployed to combat the pandemic. The $5 trillion, which funded expanded jobless benefits, financial support for small businesses, and stimulus payments, was financed with borrowed money. Some economists contended that the nation's large debt load is not unhealthy given the fact that the economy is growing, interest rates are low, and investors are still willing to buy U.S. treasuries, which gives them safe assets to help manage their financial risk. Those securities allow the government to borrow money relatively cheap and use it to invest in the economy and pay for things like roads, bridges, etc., etc., etc. For years, presidents have promised to limit federal borrowing and bring down the nation's budget deficit, which is a gap between what the nation spends and what it takes in revenues. Under President Bill Clinton, the United States actually ran a budget surplus between 1998 and 2001. However, it should be noted that might have actually caused the recession of 2001. Now, but taming deficits has fallen out of fashion in recent years, including during the Trump administration, when lawmakers blew through budget caps and borrowed money to fund tax cuts and other federal spending. Now, deficits concerns have resurfaced, helping to stall negotiations over President Biden's $2 trillion safety net and climate spending proposal. Some of this is manufactured. I think it's a political cudgel that's being used to beat Biden over the head and Democrats because you guys just want to spend. You don't want to do any savings. I think it's all bullshit. With that, some of it I'm sure is genuine, but a lot of it is just political posturing. Now, the lingering pandemic has slowed the momentum of the economic recovery, fueling inflation rates unseen since the early 1980s and raising the prospect of higher interest rates, which could add to America's fiscal burden. Now, the gross national debt represents debt held by the public, such as individuals, businesses, pension funds, as well as liabilities that one part of the federal government owes to another part. Renewed concerns about debt and deficits in Washington follows years of disregard for consequences of big spending. During the Trump administration, most Republicans ceased to be fiscal hawks and voted along party lines in 2017 to pass a $1.5 trillion tax cut, along with an increase in federal spending. Now, Republicans like the idea that tax cuts pay for themselves because if there's more money floating around the economy, there's more people buying. And then if there's more people buying stuff, that means there's more tax revenue. And so it's this virtuous cycle of like you can cut rates to a certain extent, whatever, and then you get more back in revenue. It's really kind of a thing. They call it the Laffer curve. It's like the equilibrium point between the money that you get in revenue and versus the money you're taxing out of it, and you try to get that equilibrium point. Personally, I think we've exhausted the usefulness of the Laffer curve, and by that I mean I think we've already used it to its limit, and we're beyond the point of where we can actually generate more economic activity through tax cuts, at least in aggregate. We can target certain tax cuts. I think if we did some credits to middle income and poor people, and while also raising taxes on the wealthiest or the highest income earners, and being overall generally lower tax rate than it was previously, that could also spur more growth. But I think as far as just cut taxes and you'll get growth, I think that's no longer the case. Or I'm sorry, you can cut taxes and get some growth, but you're not going to get the virtuous cycle of tax cuts, is what I should say. All right, continuing on. While Republican lawmakers helped run up the nation's debt load, they have since blamed Mr. Biden for putting the nation on a rocky fiscal path by funding his agenda. After a protracted standoff in which Republicans refused to raise America's borrowing cap, threatening a first-ever fiscal default, Congress finally agreed in December to raise the nation's debt limit to $31.4 trillion. In January of 2020, before the pandemic spread across the United States, the Congressional Budget Office projected that the gross national debt would reach $30 trillion by the end of 2025. The total debt held by the public outpaced the size of the American economy last year, a decade faster than forecasters projected. The nonpartisan office warned last year that rising interest costs and growing health spending as the population aged would increase the risk of fiscal crisis and higher inflation, a situation that could undermine confidence in the US dollar. The interest rate on debt could soon be the fastest growing part of the federal budget. Biden's administration officials insisted that they view fiscal responsibility as a priority. They have pledged that their economic agenda will be fully paid for through tax increases on wealthy Americans and corporations and by more rigorous enforcement of the tax code. Janet Yellen has predicated that inflation will moderate later this year and return to normal levels as supply chain stabilizes, which I think is actually true. In recent months, though, the budget deficit has started to shrink as a stronger economy has boosted tax receipts and as government payments of pandemic relief money has slowed. And some economists argue that more recent economic phenomenon, inflation, may have a silver lining in that it could chip away at the nation's debt burden. Kenneth Rogoff, a Howard University economist, said that rising prices essentially watered down the value of outstanding debt and increased tax revenue as income rises. He suggested that markets appear to be largely unfazed by the possibility of higher interest rates so far, and that given the other risks to the economy amid the pandemic, the scale of the national debt was not as worrying as it sounded. You would rather have no debt, of course, Mr. Rogoff said, of the $30 trillion total, but compared to other issues at the moment, that's not principal problem. And I tend to agree. And now I'm not sure if you know what MMT is. Actually, shout out to our episode, MMT, or how I learned to stop worrying and love the debt. It was like episode 4 or 5 of our podcast. Good episode. You would understand why that anytime that there's any deficit the government has is actually more money in your pocket, and any surplus money, any surplus to the budget is actually less money in your pocket. So it's one of those situations where it's not intuitive, but if you just, you think about it for a little bit and then you get into the numbers, you're like, now get into the numbers, right? You'll understand that actually is true, and it becomes more true as time goes on. So go ahead and check out that episode, actually. Now let's talk a little bit about the stock market. So stocks on Wall Street tumbled on Thursday, with big social media companies leading the way after Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram, raised concerns about the outlook for advertising on its platform. Meta said on Wednesday that changes made last year by Apple that made it harder for apps to track iPhone users. Digital habits would cost it about $10 billion in ad revenue this year. The privacy feature Apple enabled. The privacy features Apple added are a blow to advertisers who would track consumers' online behavior and use data to target them with pitches for products they might be interested in. Meta plunged 26% in midday trading on Thursday. Adding to the downdraft was the admission by the company's chief executive, Mark Zuckerberg, that it was having trouble competing with TikTok and that Facebook lost users globally. Oh, I got a new follow. Hey, thanks for the follow. Thick thighs are my demise. True. Fucking based. You and me both, buddy. Recognize the real one. All right. And so TikTok is just eating Facebook Shorts. It's just going in and just going ham and just like, give me all the young people. And, Facebook is considered boomer book, and you kind of get it, right? Now, other social media companies also slid, though. Twitter dropped about 6%. Snap and Pinterest, which report earnings Thursday after the market close, fell 22% and more than 9%, respectively. The losses weighed on the tech-heavy NASDAQ composite, which fell more than 2.7%. The broader S&P 500 declined another 1.7%. Oh, all right. Get more Fish Gaming 1989. Thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Thank you. Am I getting a raid? All right. That is very loud. So we're seeing the correction that everybody had been predicting for the last 2 years finally start to happen. Now, continuing on, quote, if a company like Facebook comes out saying it has significant earning die downs, it's going to impact the stock perhaps more than any other company that are more reliant on economic growth, said Sari Malik, Chief Investor Officer at Nuveen, a global investment manager. Quote, technology companies are very reliant on their own structural growth drivers, so if those start to go away or fade, it's going to be an issue on the stock. Also lower on Thursday was Spotify, which tumbled more than 16% after the company said it expected subscriber growth to slow in 2022. And it's really weird with specifically with streaming services, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon, Disney, because Disney owns Hulu. It's very interesting that people are like, whoa, why are you slowing down? Bro, anybody that wanted a new streaming service got it during the pandemic to have something to do. That pushed all that forward. Of course it's going to slow. You don't have enough people going out and being made to keep up with that kind of growth, right? So, and you got to wait for the young ones to age, right? You got to age into their own and getting their own accounts, right? I do consume a lot of soy-based products. Thank you for noticing. Yeah, of course. Nova Rain, Netflix isn't even profitable right now. Yeah, it's true. It's like a lot of these companies basically saw huge upgrowth in their subscriber base during the pandemic because people are looking for stuff to do, and now they spent more money to make new shows and things like that, and they're playing catch up now, and so of course that's happening. Let's see. Mark basically just noticed he needs to adapt Facebook for the modern day and is trying to adapt much too quickly. That's an interesting comment. Thick thighs are to my demise. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that, but I think it rings of some truth, though. It will depend on how quickly they're able to adapt to what they're trying to do, which is the whole metaverse and VR gaming and everything like that. If they're able to do that pretty quickly, they'll actually save themselves. And if they can't, if they're not the first to market, they're screwed because, again, Facebook is boomer book. All right. So continuing on. Also, the platform stated that it would no longer plan to issue annual guidances. This is Spotify. The audio streaming platform said that it did not expect the number of premium users to be affected by the controversy over accusations that its most popular personality, Joe Rogan, had used his podcast to spread misinformation around the COVID-19 vaccine. Now, another important thing to know about Joe Rogan is that he gets more listeners than anybody else on the fucking planet. 30 million people turn into every single one of his shows, basically. So, yeah, he's a moneymaker for them still. Now, the sell-off on Thursday ended a 4-day rebound for stock, which had been bouncing back from the plunge in January. That drop had more to do with concerns about the economy and what higher interest rates means for businesses, consumers, and stock investors as the Federal Reserve gears up to start increasing borrowing costs to cool down inflation. Now let's talk a little bit about labor. So our economic segments are pretty robust. We try to give you all the information that we can about economic activity, facts, a little bit of analysis. That's what we do here, and it's great. But before we get into that, I had another comment on here. Let's make sure I didn't miss out any of the things. Many comments. Let's see. Yeah. No, that's a good one. Let's go ahead and put that on the screen here. So Facebook is basically just an investment tech acquisition company at this point. They don't really innovate. They just buy up young companies with the pool of data money they're swimming in and keep growing. This is kind of true. Again, like I said, it will depend on what they do with VR. And one of our members, Mateo, we miss you. One of our members, though, have said that Facebook is like Yahoo and they're a walking corpse, essentially. And I think he might be right. And that's kind of what you're saying. So, all right, let's continue on to the jobs report here. So U.S. private payrolls fell for the first time in a year in January as soaring COVID-19 infections disrupted business operations, raising the risk of a sharp decline in employment that would deal a temporary setback to the labor market. The surprise drop in payrolls in the ADP National Employment Report yesterday was across all industries and business sizes, showing how much COVID has impacted in January. It added to a slowdown in manufacturing activity last month in suggesting that the economy lost significant momentum at the start of 2022 as coronavirus cases, driven by the Omicron variant, raged across the nation. Yours truly actually caught COVID and was probably out of work for a few days himself. So the good news is that the job market should quickly bounce back as the Omicron variant fades, said Gus Foucher, chief economist at PNC Financial in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Underlying demand in the economy is still strong and businesses are still trying to hire. But the January drop in employment is another reminder that the economy will not be fully returned to normal until the pandemic is over. The ADP report is jointly developed with Moody's Analytics and published ahead of the release on Friday of the Labor Department's more comprehensive and closely watched employment report for January. The ADP report counts on all active workers as employed regardless of whether they are paid or not during the survey week. In contrast, people who are out of sick or in quarantine and do not get paid during payroll surveys period are counted as unemployed, even if they still have a job with their companies. The decline in private payrolls in ADP's report suggests that some workers were laid off because of reduced demand. Businesses were also probably unable to find workers with so many people at home because of soaring infection rates. The United States is reporting an average of 433,601 cases of infections a day of the new COVID strain, sharply down from the more than 700,000 in mid-January, according to Reuters' analysis of official data. Now, demand for labor is strong, with fewer workers available, though. There were 10.9 million job openings at the end of December. That's huge. Economists expect the Federal Reserve will view a decline in payroll in January as a blip, given the near record vacancies. The labor market is already rebounding as the Omicron variant subsides. First-time applications for unemployment benefits have retreated from a 3-month high. The Omicron surge actually began in December, but the full fallout will probably become visible in the economic data for the start of 2022. The good news is, though, Omicron rates are falling sharply, and the economy should bounce back quickly. Last winter's brief drop in the Delta surge in the summer didn't prevent a year of record-breaking growth for 2021, so Omicron and this blip will be seen the same, in our opinion. Forgot to play one video. Oh, I forgot to play some videos. Oh well. All right. So we're actually just about at time, and so if there's anybody who wants to talk about anything, we got about 20 minutes or so. We're gonna finish up the news roundup. I'll stay here and converse with y'all a bit. But if you want to come on, join the Discord again. Pop on in if you got something you want to say. Hey, say it. Get in the Discord. We'll chat. All right. So one of the things that we like to do on the news roundup to you talk about, no, I did not talk about the Ottawa truck thing. I can riff on that a little bit. Let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that before we do a little bit of news of the weird. So for people that may not know, there was this weird trucker rally that went across Canada, started in Ottawa. And the reports from online activists and people that were really interested in like sticking it to the man and being anti-vaccine or at least anti-vaccine mandate blew it up to this huge thing of being like 500,000 people are descending upon Ottawa to fight against the tyranny of vaccine mandates. And it's all these truckers, and they're the working man. They're the representative of the people. And if they don't want this, then no one should want this, right? And honestly, I think it was bullshit. I don't have. So I don't think that this was, personally, I don't think that this was actually much of a thing at a grassroots level. The reason I don't think it was much of a thing of a grassroots level is because of all the postings on social media with like, oh, the Amish joined us and they cooked us barbecue. They cooked us barbecue and they were supporting us, and you know there's 20,000 SUVs here, and we're going down and we're going to make a thing. And it was semi truck drivers, right? So if you get, I don't know, 200 big rigs, it's going to look like you have a ton of people on the road, right? Because you're taking up so much of the road, even if though it's just 200 big rigs, right? And now there are similar groups being set up almost instantly. We're talking like, oh, that happened in Ottawa, we're doing it next week, right? Isn't that a little suspect? Right? I don't know. I find that to be just a little sussy. Just a little bit. Especially since it was utilizing the big rigs themselves rather than like just regular vehicles. They didn't have to take their big rigs. They were trying to make a statement, right? So I don't know. But there's some comments here. So let's get into them. So Thick Thighs Are My Demise says the nucleus of the truck thing is good natured, but its bad actors are latching onto it. I think that's true, but I also think it was astroturfed a bit. Let's see. Trucks, whoop whoop. Maybe it isn't me. Stated Ottawa was weird. Total Canadian type of protest. LL, so nice and sweet. Loud horns, not so much. Found another stream that showed the truth. What do you mean by it showed the truth, though? Oh, okay, maybe. It was like the end of a hockey game where after the fights and hits, shook hands and smiled. Okay, yeah, I feel okay. That's fair. And some of the pictures that I saw didn't show like this whole 500,000 thing. There was counts done by local police departments. They were like, we counted like 1,000 big rigs and like 40 SUVs and like 20 cars and people walking. And like, okay, that's a lot smaller than everybody was making out to be. All right, so that was good. Thank you for bringing that up for me to talk about it. That was actually good little more bit of information for y'all. So, as I was saying before that, we at Crowdsourced Politics like to do a little fun thing to round out the news program. We like to call it News of the Weird. And this week's News of the Weird is involving Rudy Giuliani because, maybe we should just watch this a little bit. All right, let's go ahead and do this.
Unmasking of Rudy Giuliani on Fox's The Masked Singer prompts judges Ken Jeong and Robin Thicke to walk off in protest. Here's the thing, and not to give Rudy Giuliani the benefit of the doubt here, but we're not even 100% sure that he knew he was going to be unmasked on this show. Not like he was trying to get away with it. I just mean Rudy Giuliani did not understand he was participating in the game The Masked Singer. The dude's not great with picking locations, okay? We haven't really heard from him since he tried to steal an election.
Okay, this is not this is not the video you're looking for. Hold on. Rudy demasked. Oh, you don't think it's available? Oh. Well, okay. We'll go back to that video then.
Unmasking of Rudy Giuliani on Ken, and not the show. Not understand he was just wearing costumes around. One day you're walking on a backlot somewhere, somebody waves you in. Next thing you know, you have some careless whisper in front of Robin Thicke in a crowd of people, and then you have to take off your helmet, and they get mad. Everybody's just mad. I don't want to defend him, okay, but I honestly think we should really look
you
at
and
the
me
fact that
both
he was
forgetful
just
confection.
accidentally there.
Love you.
There's also kind of a chance that Rudy Giuliani just murdered whoever was supposed to be in that and then just worked his way on stage. Now, I know you may think there's no factual evidence for that, but I promise you the facts may come out one day. We really need to look into this, okay? Did we check the voting machines? Unmasking of Rudy.
Okay. So that was a little video about what happened. So, oops, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about it. So Giuliani was invited to participate on the Masked Singer. He participated. When he was demasked, two of the hosts decided to like, deuces, everybody, we're out. And that just goes to show you that you just like Fox Network isn't owned by Murdoch anymore. So that makes this even weirder. Like, how did he even get on? Like, I don't know. I don't know. All right. And we have another news of the weird program. So let me just say straight out, we at Crowdsourced Politics don't kink shame. All right. But
this guy faked Down syndrome.
But what we will do, what we'll talk about, is somebody playing the part of a disabled person and how fucked up that is. So let's listen to this TikTok video here about this. And actually, I'm going to can I turn that down a little bit? Yeah, it's a little loud. And going back, and then that.
This guy faked Down syndrome so nurses would bathe him and change his diapers. At least 4 nurses claim that Paul Anthony Menchaca would pretend to be his mother and hire them to perform these tasks. And they never met the mother because they just get paid through their phones.
See, that's really fucked. That's assaulty. All right.
This whole scheme unravels when one of the nurses notices that he seems to be enjoying the baths and the diaper changes a little too much. So she follows him home from a restaurant, knocks on his door, and encounters his parents, who confirm that he does not have Down syndrome and he does not use diapers. After being arrested for this, Paul defended himself by claiming that his parents have documentation proving that his IQ is low. Believe it or not, not the only guy to try this. You got this.
Seriously? Like, bro, this is what sex work is for. You can hire people to do this willingly and not try to pull one off or one over on people and violate them in weird, fucked up ways. Like, come on.
This other guy, Rutledge Diaz, who was arrested multiple times for doing this.
And I really hope that I don't get flagged for the background music that the guy is using because it's Final Fantasy, and it shows you how much of a nerd I am. But and I really don't want that flag. Just don't flag me, please, YouTube. Like, if you flag me, I swear I don't know what I'll do because I can't leave you. It's a love-hate relationship with the YouTube, but please don't do it.
Although he didn't go all the way for Down syndrome, he just said he was handicapped. This guy faked Down syndrome.
Oof, true, but oofies. Soy Latte coming out with the burn. I hope Destiny doesn't hear about this. He'll blame the nurses. Given everything that's gone on, oh God, do I talk about the drama? No, I'm not going to talk about the drama because it's not drama. It's just really shitty fucking takes. I'm not going to talk about it, but true. I think that was a good one.
So nurses would bathe him and change his diapers. At least 4 nurses claim that Paul Anthony Menchaca would pretend to be his mother and hire them to perform.
Oh, it started over. Okay.
You got this other guy, Rutledge Diaz, who was arrested multiple times for doing this. Although he didn't go all the way for Down syndrome, he just said he was handicapped. This guy faked Down.
Okay. Enough of the repeats. We're done with that. So yeah, I mean, this is really. I mean, I don't care that this person like has this as like a fetish or what have you, but you just don't hire people to do that without them knowing that they're doing that. It's gross, creepy, it's assaulty, it's like it's all kinds of fucked up. Don't do it. And you're right, Nova Rain. I will stay on Twitch forever and be one of you, like freaks. And yeah, it's what we're doing. Anna, you're good for not getting flagged. You have a lot more of a song to get tagged. Okay, thank you. Maybe it isn't me. I appreciate that. But everybody, with that, I am very sad to say that we are out of time. And we know, so we want to thank you everybody for tuning in. giving me the comments, bringing the energy up in this podcast. It was a great little podcast, a great little news roundup. So with that, I really do thank you. It really does help me out. It makes this much more entertaining, much more engaging, because without you all as the audience, I would just be a person shouting into the void that is the internet. And while that is fun, it is not as fulfilling. So thank you everybody for joining. Now, this is actually a collaboration effort. I have a producer, Nikki Adams, who helps put together the copy. We work on it together a little bit, but a lot of the copy that we use to bring this program to you is made by her. The majority of it actually is made by her. So thank you, Nikki, again. Without you, this would take me a lot more time, and it wouldn't be as comprehensive as it is and as succinct as this. So you're really great at this. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And people in our community, in our Facebook group, they suggest to us topics to do. And so without them, we wouldn't be covering as much and we might miss some things. That's why it's crowdsourced, everybody. So if you liked what we did, hey man, hey everybody, smash that like button. It really does help us out with the algorithms. And I know you liked it because you're still here. So hey, just do that, right? If this is the kind of stuff that you're like, we do other podcasts. We do Cipher State. Cipher State is a foreign affairs, foreign policy focused podcast where we tackle a geopolitical issue kind of within an hour and a half or so, bringing the kind of analysis that you can only get by going across the political spectrum and giving you the context for that as well. We did have a fairly recent episode or so of the Crowdsourced Politics podcast proper called Defund or Refund the Police. And that focused on the issues that are facing police reform, what actually works when it comes to policing and community interactions, and some things about how to fix issues that we're having. And that one actually featured Counterpoints, our good friend Connor from Counterpoints, and he was able to give some good insights to that, as well as Wordy of Wordy Talks, who was also on that cast as well. Again, join the Discord. We're going to have more contests on Discord and everything like that. And yeah, be sure to pay attention to the Discord, pay attention to the Twitter, and yeah, stick around for a good minute or so while I look for somebody to raid. So we're gonna raid somebody. Let's see, raid. Oh wait, shout out. Come on. Shout out to, where are you at? Oh, you're not on here anymore. Oh, okay. Oh, yep. So, what was your new name? Hold on, I forgot your name. Wow, that's really bad. Oh, So Latte, you're a friend of the show. Appreciate you, buddy. Hopefully we see more of you around, and I'm able to catch some of more of your shows live as they happen. But we are going to raid. Who are we going to raid? We're going to raid I'm Really Important. I'm Really Important does similar to work to what we do. And so yeah, if you like this show, you'll probably like I'm Really Important. He might just be wrapping up. He might be still going strong, but that's what we like to do here. So go ahead and stick around for the raid. And as always, everybody, keep your head up through the political storm.